This is a conversation about composing and performing with modular synthesizers. So if that's not what you're interested in, you might want to go someplace else. We've got a few people here that were performing last night, and we also have one exciting last-minute addition. We have Tyondai Braxton, who performed last night. Ty. There he is. We have Moe Espinosa, who performed last night as Hypoxia. Oh, you can hide in the corner. You're going to have to sit up here. And Bana Haffar, who performed last night as well. And finally, our super exciting last-minute guest, who has an amazing sculptural multimedia piece on display at the Black Mountain College Museum downtown, Richard Devine. I am your moderator, Tony Rolando. So I'm not going to give any further introduction than that. If you were at the concert last night, you know these three, and you can most certainly get to know Richard if you go see his piece at the Black Mountain College Museum. Also, obviously, you can find these people's works all over the place. They've all played music on modular synthesizers around the world, and that is why we brought them here to ask them questions. And I want to start with a little message to all of you. We are seeking entertainment more than facts, so please do not be afraid to embellish or all out lie for the sake of protecting the magic of your art. Okay, the most exciting topic for me, danger. Danger in live performance. This is what modular synthesizers mean to me, essentially. Things go wrong. And you see it in the excitement that an audience will have when a car crashes in a NASCAR race. You get it when the rock band, when they break a string or they drop their guitar or maybe they kick a drum set over. In modular, there's just so much that can go wrong. And so I guess I want to start by asking, well, for one, danger is important. You've got to have it. Without danger in your performance lacks a certain energy that makes, well, at least me, feel compelled to watch. And yet you also don't want too much of it because it can completely destroy your performance. So what are your strategies for both preserving danger but also avoiding the overload of danger in a live modular synthesizer performance? I'm going to start with Rich.
Well, it's funny that Tony picked me first because I've had a lot of major catastrophes happen to me. I remember one time playing at Bergheim in Berlin, I had a module actually vibrate in half from the sound system. I remember in the middle of my performance going, oh, the power just went on my nebulae. Why is that happening? But the vibrations on the stage from the subwoofers, I didn't realize by the end of the night I unscrewed the module. I took it out and it just fell into a bunch of pile of pieces into my case, and I was like, oh, well, it just came apart from vibration. And another time, I remember I called Tony when I was in Pittsburgh, I don't know if you remember this,
yes,
where I was at a sound check at another festival, and I turned on my case on stage, and 5 of my modules just blew up. Like, literally blew up. There was smoke coming out, and it was like filling the entire space of the stage, and the stagehand people was like, is everything okay? I'm like,
hell no.
No, we have a problem. I don't know if I'm going to be able to play. And it's like, well, you have to play in 20 minutes. And 5 of the modules were really important. I remember asking Tony, was one of your, but I think something was happening. Some dirty power had happened, you know, unexpected. I blew the IC chip.
Dirty power, folks.
Yeah.
Stay away from the dirty power.
Yeah, well, the club I was playing at, it was kind of sketchy. Like the lights, there was all kinds of weird things going on. You don't know. I mean, the thing is, when you play with these instruments, they're already sort of, you know, each one that you build, it's your own creation. So you're using your own combination of modules. There's different power draws, different power supplies. There's all these different things. There's no standardized way of doing things. So you're already kind of playing around in this odd situation. Then you take that situation to a whole different place where you don't know what you're walking into.
Right.
Every time you're walking into something completely different. And I've learned a lot of things over time. What I do is I have backup plans.
Okay.
If I have a module go down, my case, if you guys look on Modular Grid, I do have duplicates of certain modules, like braids, for instance. I have 3 braids. So if I have one go down, there's a problem with one, I always have a backup module that can do backup things. And then I have multiple samplers too sometimes. If there's a problem that happens, I use these, what are they called? Division 6 makes these little LED light indicator. They give you activity, positive, negative voltages.
You could also use the CV bus for that.
You could use the CV bus. You can use that. Yeah, that's true. For me, I don't have the CV bus case, which I would love to have one in 12U. If you guys make one, I would.
So damn heavy.
It would be heavy. But another good tip, if you guys are using, because a lot of
wants
times,
it in 12.
Yeah. So what I do a lot of times is I have a stackable cable. If something's not working in the dark and you have a problem with the module, I take the stackable cable. I pull out the output, whatever the problem is. I run one of those Division 6 light indicators that tells me if there's any activity happening. I first check to see if there's anything, if it's working correctly. So I kind of problem diagnose that way. I'm like, all right, it's functioning properly. That's not what the problem is. I check the cable next, and then you kind of do this process of elimination. Well, you should be performing, right? You should be playing music, but a lot of times you have things come up where you have to think.
It's all part of it.
So I bring little things with me that I can problem solve things very fast in case something goes wrong.
Okay.
And I have a backup plan. I always have a backup plan.
Okay,
If
backup
something goes
plan,
wrong, I have a sampler or something where I could buy me some time.
I was going to mention that because you talked once about how you had a problem and you literally took one of the audio outputs from the Woggle Bug and passed it into your mixer and just let it rip while you figured out what the hell was going on with the rest of the
this sounds absolutely terrible what he's doing, but
it was doing something.
It's better than
it gave you a wall to hide behind while you figured out what was going on, right?
And sometimes you got to do that. Sometimes you have to do things because things are going to. I think with almost every performance I've ever played, I've always had something go wrong.
Sure, right?
Every time.
You hear that? See, everyone thinks everyone has a problem every night.
And everybody thinks you have all the time in the world to play, right? When I get booked at a festival, they give me. They're like, you have 20 minutes, you have 15 minutes to get set up. And I just played in Mexico City, I had no sound check. They were just like, yeah, you're going to set up your stuff on stage. I had barely enough time to set up my modular on stage. I didn't know what it was going to sound like. And then you open it up, and I was like, oh, this is 3,000 people. I hope this sounds good. Yeah. Sorry if it sounds terrible. I didn't get the sound check.
Do any of you keep things like flashlights on stage with you?
Yes.
Yeah.
Phone flashlight.
See, the phone though I have a problem with because it's like it does all this other crap.
That's great.
Yeah, there you go. That. Right. Right.
It's a pro move right there.
Rich, you mentioned the dirty power, and I'm not joking. I mean, dirty power is a serious problem.
It's a real thing, yeah.
Have you ever considered traveling with like some sort of power conditioner?
And stuff? I thought about it a few times.
I mean, they're not that expensive. It could buy you a lot of peace of mind.
Well, no, but it does add weight because I'm not traveling with so much gear.
They are heavy.
But you can request
really
your rider.
Yeah.
If you get to a certain point where you're playing a lot of shows, I would highly recommend that. Bring a power conditioner on stage where you can get some filtered, clean power, and you won't get these sort of irregular.
Hey, put it in your rider.
Yeah, put it in your rider. If you
I'm not joking. I mean,
put it in your rider. Yeah.
If you can ask for it. They don't have to give it to you. But
give
why
up
not
the green
M&Ms.
Just get the conditioner.
Yeah, skip the fucking bottle of whiskey. Give me a power conditioner, right? And they'll know you mean business.
Exactly.
You'd be surprised how many promoters actually care more about what's on your hospitality rider than what's on your technical.
Yeah, technical rider. It's true. They don't
like you show up to the club and you're like, hey, what kind of vodka do you want tonight? And it's like, I just want that mixer that I asked for.
Right.
What mixer?
Let's get this fucking party started. Yeah, right. They want a party. Right.
The mixer. That's the thing I want. The mixer.
That's awesome. Well, I mean, it's actually awful, but I can totally see it. Yeah, right. So Rich you have strategies. Anyone else have other interesting strategies that folks might like to hear about? Like, the flashlights, power conditioners, spare modules, obviously spare cables, right?
Power cycling in time. I've been practicing that sometimes.
What do you mean by that?
Because sometimes when modules freeze, modules that I won't name, or gear freezes, The only way that will unfreeze them is if you power cycle. So I will practice like power cycling
in the middle of a performance.
Yes,
you cycle power.
I've had to do it.
Wow.
So I'll like practice like
that is raw. That is raw danger right there. Cycling power.
Power cycling in time and just remembering the protocol of what to, you know, what to reset after you power cycle. But that's something that
is.
I've had to do that a couple times too.
Yeah.
It was for different reasons, but I've had to power cycle. I was like, it's doing something.
It's like, and you just get to that point and you're like, that's the only way that my system is going to cooperate.
Yeah.
I have to power
That's
cycle.
cool.
And just practicing that time is just kind of ridiculous.
What about when you get to a place where you're going to perform? Do you tune your patch to the room? Ty?
At first, when I first started getting into modular, I was pretty obsessive about trying to tune my oscillators. But I soon realized that just the way that I used the instrument, first of all, I would purposely like send things out of tune, or I would like modulate the frequency a little bit so it would kind of fall off. And so I kind of stopped altogether trying to have my live modular be in tune with the room. So it's kind of it's more real time, play by ear. And unlike these guys who played yesterday, I was using a laptop. So actually,
it's true.
Guilty as charged. Yeah, I mean, and to kind of go to your question before of like, how do you deal with problems? I mean, it's kind of a thing too where I'm able to kind of have some secure playback where I can kind of understand what the overall arc of my set's going to be, and kind of have an element of danger with the live modular material. But I don't actually tune my modules anymore live.
Okay.
It's more of interacting with my live rig and Ableton.
I guess what I'm talking about is I saw Alessandro Cortini perform at the Machines and Music a few years ago. Was anyone at Machines and Music when Cortini performed? Yeah. A couple people? All right. Well, you missed something amazing. But he, during his sound check, was literally retuning the resonances of his patch. The room was not unlike this, but quite large. But it had it had a lot of wood trusses, I guess these are. And the whole room was resonating in strange ways. Some of it he liked, some of it he didn't like. And he was going through and retuning his patch during soundcheck. It took forever, but it really made a big difference. So I guess I was curious if any of you all ever did that. You're saying you don't typically do that. Well, what about Bana? I know you used to be a ruthless oscillator tuner.
No, I still am, but I just don't use a tuner. I just do everything by ear. But I am obsessed with tuning. But just I don't use any kind of a digital reference.
Gotcha,
anymore.
that's good. Yeah.
I mean, yeah. To answer your question about tuning to your room, I think it just depends on how much time you have to prepare.
Right.
But I did a performance piece with a friend of mine at an art space a couple of weeks ago, and we had a full day to kind of set up the piece, and I realized that. Just because of the nature of the space, I didn't need the reverb, I didn't need the delay, so I removed a lot of effects that I had used at home and when we were rehearsing together. But that was because we had the luxury of kind of being in the space a full day before and just making that call, like actually there's not going to be any reverb on this. And
because you could tell
because the space was so reverberant.
Have you ever done that, Rich?
Well,
he's in 5th grade again.
What was the question?
Rich, man. Okay, so what we're talking about?
No. I'm with Bana. Like, if I have the time, if I do get time before I do it, a proper sound check, I do. I like to walk around the room, and I definitely tune the patch to the space and specifically to the sound system.
Yeah.
Because I played on so many different sound systems where the modular can sound drastically different than like when you play like on a D&B PA rig than on a Function 1 PA rig. Like last summer I played on like 40, 50 Function 1 rigs, outdoor festivals, and like the sound of a Function 1 rig outside sounds drastically different than the acoustics of how things sound in space. So you don't get reverb, you don't get as much reflections and stuff. And if I'm in a big reverberated, like say like Bergheim, if I played at Bergheim, right, which has got big ceilings and is really reverberated, I turn all my reverb off.
Yeah.
I play more of a dry set. You clean things up, you get more separation and detail in the instruments. But if I'm outside where you don't get the reflections and everything's already dry, then I might add in a little reverb to get things more spaced, to make it sound more spacious. I always try to kind of pay attention to like how far the system is apart, how, you know, is the stereo imaging really bad? Sometimes if the stereo imaging is too far apart, like I've been to festivals where they have the system so spread out that if I did a lot of panning, people that were on one side of the stage are only hearing one thing. So when in those situations, I just pan everything in the center, keep everything right down the middle. You know, I do just little checks.
And these are dramatic changes, folks. But sometimes you have to take those risks to make it sound really good. Turning off the reverb, I mean, honestly, it's a
simple thing.
You feel naked for a minute.
Yeah,
totally. But it was a very like I was like, okay, I'm doing it. I'm not gonna have reverb on this.
Yeah.
Right.
And it was fine. But I was
it probably sounded way better. There's probably more clarity. The end result was better, but that in that moment that you turn it off, you feel like you're peeling away this amazing layer of your patch.
But if you're in a space that has natural reverb and you hear it,
you still feel it.
You still feel it, yeah.
It sounds better.
It's good. Like I said, if you do have the time, especially with modulars, to go out and tweak a little bit of things to the room, the performance can be better based on little decisions you make beforehand. So.
Mo, you have a little bit of a different. I'm going to step outside of the modular realm, and when you do your techno gigs, I mean you've got to tune to the PA then, right? Or is that also the same thing? Maybe you have time, maybe you don't.
Yeah, I mean usually we have sound checks on the rider, but obviously due to flight issues, sometimes you don't always get the opportunity to do it. But sometimes I just wing it at the club.
Yeah.
I mean, different kick drums put
That's
out
what I was thinking about.
Different bass frequencies on different sound systems, and different soundtracks have bigger tracks have bigger impact on the crowd.
Right.
So on. So
can you make changes on the fly?
It depends. I mean, it depends on how live your environment is. I mean, because most DJs are just playing pre-recorded material from other people, and at that point, you're actually going through your library and you're picking out tracks that you know have kick drums or bass drums or bass lines that work well in certain environments than others.
Right.
That's why, like Bergheim is a place where everything works. Because DJs love playing there because the way the room sounds. It just sounds huge. Even if you play the most minimalistic tracks, they just sound massive on that sound system. So, yeah.
Actually, last night I think we experienced that a little bit with Meg's piece, which was extremely minimal. But in that room, I thought the character that it was allowed to have in that room was phenomenal. So I know what you're talking about. I've only been to Bergheim the one night you took us there, but stuff did really sound phenomenal there. I was also amazed at how much clarity the PA had for a techno club. You usually wouldn't get that kind of clarity.
Yeah, they had that room.
Let's sidestep away from sound and into the visual impact of a performance. I know we're supposed to talk about composing too. We'll try to get some of that in, but I just got more excited about talking about performances because it's rare. So many people use modular synthesizers to compose in the studio and whatnot, but you all are actually taking them out in front of people and performing them live. So I think that's a pretty great thing. Visual impact. Obviously, we had a screen in the back, and we'll talk about that, like the visuals you can select to accompany your piece. But have you ever thought about the choreography of your performance? And what I mean by that, Rob unfortunately could not make it because he got sick. But if any of you saw Robert A. Lowe's performance last night, you might have noticed that he has a lot of motions that he does with his hands and his head and his body that, while they're small because he's just one person, they can actually be really effective and compelling and beautiful. Have you ever thought about what you look like on stage while you're performing on your modular synthesizer? And have you ever considered that certain motions could look better than others? Ty, you're thinking about it. What do you got?
That's a good question.
I think the thing that comes from, I think all of us have had experience performing in groups and as like live instrumentalists. And I think what's liberating to me as thinking about this model of performance is kind of like anti-performance in a way, and I really enjoy it actually. And like sometimes my wife does my visuals, so it's kind of like your focal point is on that. And for me, like
mine wasn't. I was watching you.
Oh, you were watching. Okay, cool. But for me, for the most part, it's kind of like the more neutral that I present myself as a performer, I think the more effective it is for at least what I'm trying to convey within the set. So it's not as it's not as theatrical. I'm not trying to draw attention to myself in any way, and there's a kind of that neutrality is something that's actually really attractive to me about making this kind of music.
It's comfortable.
Yeah, it's like relinquishing that role of like the fireworks or like just like the artist Mark Fell. I really love his music and I love his aesthetic as a performer because I was reading about what his take on performance was, and he's just like, you know, the more kind of anti-performance I can bring to the table, the better. He's like, right before the end of my set, I'll put like a water bottle like right in view of everyone of the audience that's like trying to kind of like get into the thing, and I'll just start drinking it, and then I'll just turn the thing off and walk away. And like, there's something about that that's just like, the message there is just more about like just kind of taking in the actual sound, taking in the thing, and less about what the performer is doing. Okay. And I like that methodology.
Okay. I know you like that, but the reality is that people are watching you.
That's why there's videos.
Bana? You think the videos mean that no one's watching you?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know, like for me personally, I think just because of my background playing bass and playing in bands and like, you know, spending a lot of time jumping off of drum risers and being given
I want to
things.
See the video
like,
of that.
We were on tour once and with this band, and towards the end of the tour, this was in Japan. This is when I was playing bass. Every show we would play, they would give us more things to jump off of, and then those boxes became bigger and higher, and it was just ridiculous. And I think that I've gotten that all out of my system. I'm really enjoying not doing that, and also my brain is so busy just making sure that my stuff is working that I don't have the bandwidth to like work. I just can't think about what I look.
That's a reasonable statement. I would say.
I'm just trying to run the patch. That's like #1 priority.
Yeah. Okay.
I've been through the whole band thing as well, and like, you know, being in a punk band and just getting crazy on stage and having fun. But I don't know. I think there was something I've always been attracted to about electronic music, was that music itself wasn't always focused on the performer. It wasn't always about the person who was doing it. You know, completely losing yourself in the music is the most important part. And personally, if I had a preference at any show I play, it doesn't matter. If I could be completely in the dark or on the side with the visuals and just out of the sight of people, I would prefer it that way.
Okay.
I mean, you know, I don't know, you hear it in magazines and, you know, Facebook chatter, and people were like, oh yeah, I went to go see this DJ or this performer. He was just up there standing with his glasses, like noodling on some, I want to see him dance. I want to see him be a part of it. I don't want to be the monkey in the show. You know,
gotcha.
Like, that's not, I'm not here to perform, you know, like a dancer. I mean, it's okay if people do it. If it's part of their thing and it's who they are, I have nothing against it. That's just not me, really. It's not what I want to do. I want people to completely lose themselves in my music when I'm performing. And I think me being up there in front of everybody is just nothing but a distraction.
Is it an antiquated way of presenting music then? I mean, why the hell do we even have a stage? Or why don't we just, why don't you tour with a sculptor who builds a sculpture every night and you sit behind it?
We seem to have set up this format that, you know, everybody in the world needs to follow.
Right.
The stage, the person in the center, and the people in front of you. But I think a lot of performers over the years have tried to present different ways of performing where they're not. Like, there's a guy from Minneapolis, DVS1, who did a huge sound installation at Sonar Festival where they did a wall of sound and all the lighting was facing one wall, and, you know, try to guide the entire crowd to look that way, but he was playing in the back.
Huh.
You know,
everyone turned around.
No, I mean, you know, they didn't tell him what he was playing.
Okay.
He was just kind of like went in the back of the room to a little booth and did a performance there. And I think some people were confused by it, but it's hard to actually change, you know, that format when we're so used to. You know?
Well, the orchestra used to be on a pit, so you couldn't see them. You think it's the Beatles that ruined it for everyone, or like, where did it come from? Rich, also, you're shaking your head, but here's the thing. You're one of the most entertaining people. And who here has seen Richard perform live modular? I mean, have you ever watched this guy's face while he's performing live? It's
like
very
taking a big shit, right?
His face represents the sound you're hearing the whole time.
It's funny, like, I personally don't like to see myself performing.
We don't have to watch it, we watch it.
Well, no, I know you guys like watching, but I'm like with Mo and you know what you were saying about, like, I personally would rather be in a dark room where they can't see what I'm doing. It's funny, like when I just played at Super Booth, it's funny, like I left the stage and the crowd, there was a mob of like 50 people that just came and looked at my case.
I've seen those photos.
Yeah, they're always looking around my case and I was like, well, you could ask me a question about it, but no one cared. They're just all like wanting to look at my case. I was like, but what about the music? Like, you guys care about the music? There's like no one really, they're just more obsessed about the machine or what I was doing with the machine. And then I feel like even like from a performance perspective in the modular scene, it's almost become more obsessive about
absolutely
the machines, and the people they're important, but like I guess with me, everyone's just so obsessed with what I'm using or something. And I was like, hey, you can ask me a question, I'll tell you. But in the performance thing, going back to it, I don't know. I like Autechre's approach. Turn all the lights off.
Just black.
Nothing. You might get some exit lights, right? You have nothing.
We tried to turn the exit lights off at the venue last night.
They wouldn't do it. Yeah,
that's illegal.
Yeah, it's illegal.
It's illegal. I would much prefer that approach where you're not thinking about. It's already taking your mind out of focusing on the person. Because you start thinking about that person, about what they're doing, their facial expressions, and things they're doing, and I mean that's cool. Some people like that, and like most of people follow that. It's like a tradition. It's just kind of built into our brains. But I feel like some of my most memorable performances I've seen. One, I remember I was playing at Sonar one year in 2001. I saw Stockhausen play in a theater. He did an 8-channel piece. It was the Hymn, I think it was the national anthems, where he took one national anthem, modulated on another one and another one, this multi-channel piece. And I was in a row with my friend Drew and Martin from this band Matmos. You guys know those? We all went together, and they turned all the lights off, completely pitch black. It was one of the most visceral, crazy shows I'd ever experienced in my entire life. I felt like I was witnessing something like this, like a once-in-a-lifetime thing, and just the way the sounds, like it was like 3-dimensional sounds coming together over my head in the air. I could almost like picture them being combined and mixed together. Like there was just no light. We were in complete darkness. You know, we couldn't see anything. He had made everyone turn all the lights off in the theater, and I was like, wow, it really made you focus on what was happening, the composition, the evolution of things growing, exploding. Like you really thought about what he was doing.
Yeah.
And there was no distractions at all. And that, to me, is like, if I can get that amount of attention and focus, you know, I know that's hard to do these days. And the way that things are happening with social media, people having like 1-minute attention spans on things. But just to be able to sit down and like do nothing but focus on the music, I think that's a really important thing.
You're shaking your head, Ty, but Hive. I mean, I don't know who here has either seen video of or was lucky enough to see a performance of Hive. It was almost the human as part of a sculpture, which was part of the total composition. It was like a visual spectacle with music.
Well, yeah. Yeah, it was.
Why did you move? Are you moving away from that permanently, or was that just one thing you did, or you want to get back into doing something more multimedia approach? It's something where it could be sculptural and visually.
Guess it depends on the project. I mean, when it comes with that, it was a 5-piece group, so I don't know. And plus the physicality of watching. It was a piece for 3 percussionists and 2 modular synth players. So you know, you see kind of the stoicism of 2. And you're sitting on these kind of wooden mushroom pods. So there's these 5 pods
that
are lit from the bottom. And it kind of looks like the Supreme Court. These people kind of sitting cross-legged on top of these mushrooms. Like it's kind
and the percussionists, they were trained, so they're very like they were very rigid.
Yeah, and they're really great performers. So to kind of watch, like there was a visual aspect of in the performance that was kind of compelling. So I'm not rejecting that model, and I'm not just advocating for one, but. I think just when I'm playing by myself,
gotcha.
When it comes to just me up there with the electronics, there's not too much to see, you know, from the performance aspect of it. So I agree with these guys where it's kind of, I feel like you get more power in taking me out of the equation. But when it comes to like a group or some kind of weird installation piece like that, then there's maybe room for some kind of visual component.
There's probably no right or wrong way to go.
Of course not.
Yeah, there's different performances, different settings, different environments lend to different impacts for different things. I mean, I take a lot of my inspiration from like early 90s, you know, techno rave parties where you'd go to these dark underground warehouses and there was no lasers, no lighting, no strobes, usually just like one light bulb swinging with a red light or something like that. But being in those completely dark environments were just like completely, you know, soaked into the music. You know?
Yeah.
It's like being in a sensory deprivation tank and you just all you hear is music, you know what I mean?
All right.
Also,
No, I was just saying, but I mean, there's a lot of people who are stage performers who have great presence. You know, probably look a lot cooler than I do up there doing their thing. And you know, if it works for them and it entertains the crowd, then absolutely it works. You know.
You always be a cool dude in my book. Anna?
Also, I mean, I feel like with modular music, it's also a very introspective kind of music, and you know, why does the performer also have to physically perform? I mean, shouldn't the music kind of stand for itself? And I mean, I think that as somebody who loves to watch modular performances, also like I'm not very concerned with what the performer looks like because I'm so focused on the music. And I mean, you know, these are very dense pieces of music typically, and I think that that it's okay to separate the performer from the music and just focus on the ambience and the way that you feel as a listener, versus trying to see, well, what's the facial expression of the person playing. And I played on stage last night, but normally when I perform, I don't stand on stage because I don't like stages. I feel that I feel that it's kind of time to switch up this dynamic of performer and audience. And I like to stand in front of the stage so that I have the same listening experience as the audience, especially like through the PA. And it would just be interesting to see more spaces that have maybe a PA that's more distributed and like spatialized sound, where there's no specific focus on one direction or stereo and a performer in the middle, where it's more of a kind of mixed, diffused situation with multi-channels. And yeah, it's kind of strange that we haven't moved past this format yet.
Well, it might have something to do with microphones. It's just thinking modular, you typically would not have any instruments that need to be mic'd and amplified, and so you can go ahead and you can have your system in the center of the room with the audience having the same experience with them. With a rock band, they would have all sorts of feedback problems. The vocalist would move around, and you get all sorts of squealing and stuff. But that's a great point. I mean, maybe what needs to happen, I guess, is people have to have enough interest that there will be a club that was devoted to that.
It's a question of architecture and design also for so new spaces for new instruments.
Right. Yeah, that might take a few more years.
Sounds expensive.
How are we on time?
20 minutes.
1 minute. 20. Okay, great. 20 minutes. All right. Well, trying to decide if I want to do one of these other questions, if we want to open up for questions from the audience here. Are there questions? Whoa, yeah, there's some questions. How about we'll go with the guy in the green shirt?
You talk about like performance, and different styles of performance. And recently I've been seeing a lot of artists that are getting into bodysuits, things that they can put on their body that interact with modular.
Okay.
Well, have any of y'all experimented with any of those things?
I don't think they make them in my size.
I don't think this is the same thing, but Rich, you're experimenting a lot with, and this actually would get into foiling Bana's plan of moving everything to the center of the room, because they are kind of like microphones, but I don't know what the feedback situation's like on them, but maybe you could talk about the poly...
Oh, the poly triggers, yeah.
Yeah.
But I also could answer his question, because I was at Super Booth in Berlin, and I got these new wireless Bluetooth CD gate trigger finger things. I forget the name of the company. They just sent me a couple, but there's a module that receives a Bluetooth receiver that has multiple gate and CV outputs you can route to your system. Then you put on these little finger triggers and you can move them through the air. There's a pressure trigger that you can push that sends basically CV voltages that you can press, and then you have gates. You can fire off gates with the other buttons, and then you can do these performance, and you can have as many of them on your fingers as you want. So they were at their booth and they were kind of like pressing their fingers and pushing different ones and composing and doing stuff on the fly. So I have a couple of them. I haven't actually had time yet to play with them. I want to play with them because it'd be really cool for sound design applications to be able to set up a patch and control a bunch of modules and effects with, instead of using like a planner or joystick or something, being able to use these finger controllers would be really interesting because you don't just have a joystick, you have now multiple. But now I'm getting into using the Rolly. Do you know the Rolly C-board? So I've been experimenting with the new blocks controllers, and I just got the Endorphins shuttle control. And then the Polyend also makes a module that uses has MPE support. That's basically the multi-MIDI gestural. So you could use the Rolly blocks controller to control your modular. So I'm getting into newer ways of gesturally controlling the system with more, I don't know, expressiveness. But going back to what you were saying about the...
Oh yeah, could those potentially be causing feedback? Problems?
Which one? In the
the triggers that you use.
Oh, the triggers I was using.
Because they have to be mic'd. Are they mics as well?
Well, I didn't actually use... We're recording the piece in Ambisonic. We're using an Ambisonic mic in there, this Sennheiser Ambio VR mic. But we're just recording the acoustic ambience of the piece. But I have contact mics that I've taped to each object.
Okay, right.
That those triggers are hitting because of feedback issues.
Gotcha.
That's why I decided to use contact mics as a direct route and then amplify the contact microphone so we get a good clean signal and then take those signals and then process them. But you're right, if I were using different microphones, especially in their surround speaker setup, and then be close to speakers, there'd be a lot of feedback issues, which is why I was like, yeah, we're going to do this with contact.
Yeah, it still sounds great.
Yeah, the contact mics still work out, even though they're PAs and mics. They need a little bit more juice to. So he's using a Coma field kit because it has these built-in amplifier section with little crude EQs that you can beef up the PASO signals and get a much better signal without ground hum and stuff like that. But
all right.
Has everybody seen Richard's installation? It's amazing. If you haven't, you should definitely go.
You got to get over and see it today because I think you're taking it down end of the day, or
no, it's at 5 o'clock. They told me that I have to shut it down. But if you guys get a chance to go check it out, it's actually a perfect example of what we were talking about. Going to see a piece without the performer at all.
Right.
So you can go see a modular do its own thing, and I love that idea. That's why when you guys asked me to be a part of this, I was like, oh, I could perform. No, I want to do something completely different. I actually don't want to be the performer at all. I want to create a piece where the performer is not there. It's just a piece he's created that's ongoing.
I mean, how many painters stand next to their paintings in the museum? I mean, I agree with you. I think, that maybe something else I think about. I have a buddy who was talking about, what if his band could tour without going on tour? And what he was talking about was, what if you took that piece and you have to hire someone to knew how to set it up and maintain it. But it could go on the road and go all over the country, all over the world, while you're staying at home taking care of the kids. But it would still be you. It would still be your art. It would still be your piece. And people would still be thrilled to go see it because they're not just listening to it coming off a PA. It's actually physically there, and they can look at it. It's still very interesting. Maybe you all should start trying to do something like that.
That's what I mean when for writing notated pieces for orchestra or chamber orchestra. That's what it is.
Essentially,
the score, and people read the score, and they go play, and then someone gives you a call and says, "Oh, your piece was great last night, 3,000 miles away." And you're like, "Oh,
that's good."
I was at home watching Netflix. So it's interesting to think about that model applied to electronic music, actually. And we were having this conversation actually last night, talking about incorporating laptops and pre-recorded material, the significance of just having things the way that you want them in essentially just showing the work, and like the hang-ups about performance versus just showing the thing that you've created. You know what I mean? And I think that's kind of what we're getting at here, and just the idea of just being able to kind of show like the maybe it's not completely finished because you're actually still kind of performing in it live, but something that's maybe a little more predefined, where it's more like a finished work.
Yeah,
and you're just kind of showing the work.
Right. Take another question. This fellow in the blue shirt.
Hey, sort of related to the previous discussion about watching the performer, flip it a bit, watching the audience. Obviously, in a traditional band, you're out facing the audience, you can see them. Whereas in the modular world, often the patches are so complex, you're trying to orchestrate everything in front of you. Do you ever miss that experience of looking up and just absorbing how the audience is reacting?
Definitely, yeah. I think so. Like for me personally, when I'm performing with a modular synthesizer, I'm completely in a vortex of what is in front of me, and I don't look up. I'm just kind of. I mean, maybe that will come with time. I don't know. Like you guys have been doing this longer, so maybe you're at a point where you can look up every now and again. But again, compared with playing bass. When it was more of a muscle memory kind of thing, and I wasn't playing looking at my hands. I was very much connecting with the audience, and it's a completely different experience with modular. I don't know how to kind of bridge that yet.
You could still look up from what you're doing every once in a while and see, but there's a different maybe responsibility you have when you're in a band and you're kind of like engaging the audience, or at least in the way that I know it, where you're kind of like feeding off the energy maybe of the audience. Whereas with something like this, there is more maybe of a divide, and it's maybe less necessary to be like, yeah, you know what I mean? and I kind of like that. It kind of feeds into what you guys were talking about before of just like. That where the focus is more on just the overall sound and just the performance, the music and that experience, and less about the theatrics. So that's what I'm taking your question to mean, of like the idea of engaging the audience in some way in this format. For me, is something that I'm glad not to have to do, and I feel like its strength is in that the audience gets to just kind of experience it purely without being kind of goaded into a good experience. If that makes sense.
I'll be honest with you. It didn't matter what medium I performed in, I never looked at the audience. I don't know. It could have been maybe just started off from being young and having stage fright and just kind of getting lost in my own world or something, but I've always been one to just, I don't know, get completely lost in my own world and just let the music be an extension of myself, And just, with DJing, it's a little bit different because obviously people like to lay down rules that you're playing for the crowd. You play a track, you see how they react, and you adjust the environment and stuff like that. But even as a DJ, I've never been one to be a crowd pleaser or play stuff that people want to hear. I've always just played what I want to play. And I've been fortunate enough to always have great feedback. But it didn't matter whether I was doing modular performances or DJing or even just playing live PAs with other people with multiple electronic music gear. I've kind of just been locked in my world and doing my thing,
Antisocial performance.
Well, yeah, I mean, I have another project called Belief Defect, and I play with another person. We play on stage, and when we get into it, and like, of course, you dance, you're enjoying your own music, you're lost in your world, you're rocking out to your own stuff, but hardly ever am I like grabbing the mic like, yeah, get to me, guys. Like, I'm just
like you practice.
Yeah, I'm not that person, but yeah. So.
Man.
That's funny. I was going to say that when I've done some performances, it usually depends on the crowd. I played at festivals where, like last night was a much different experience, where people are sitting down. It's not people aren't drinking, there's not alcohol or drugs involved. Like sometimes when I play festivals, I might make my set a little more rowdy if I know people are really up for it, because I've definitely come to festivals where I have some fans that are like, I want my face blown off. Kill me.
Wait. Can you give us your strategy, your control voltage strategies for making a modular more rowdy? I want to hear that.
One of the times I played at Bergheim, there was an especially rowdy night where I had a really, really rowdy crowd. They were really had a few hours of drinks in them. And
more.
Yeah, and they really, I mean, you just know. I was like, I know what they want.
But what is the control voltage strategy for that? I mean, how do you, I'm serious. Okay, like a rock band, they just turn up the volume.
Right,
what do you do?
I don't know. It's like, well, that's another thing I like about performing with the modular, especially my system. I have it set up to where if I want to be able to get extremely aggressive, I can set up things fairly quickly and change my set completely.
Okay.
That's another thing we didn't really talk about is that reading the room, reading the crowd, reading the situation. Like when I've gone and played different festivals, like I'll walk around, I'll figure out who's playing before me, after me, like the order of things, figure out if I'm gonna fit in the scheme of what's happening.
Okay.
And try to get a read of what's going on, like what the crowd's like, because you don't want to do terrible, right? So what I always try to do is read a little bit into what's the atmosphere, and then I'll think about what I'm going to do. I'm like, all right, well, things are kind of mellow. Should I keep with the mellow vibe that's already been happening tonight, or should I bump things up, And sometimes, like, I've gotten to festivals and people are, usually like me and Moe, we play late night. People are pretty messed up and out of their minds and really want to really, go off. So sometimes I'll change my whole set.
Okay.
Like, make decisions and be like, all right, I'm going to go. No, I'm just going to give it to them. Like, let's go nuts. Let's have some fun, It just all depends. But that's what I love about the modular. When I was doing sets with a computer, I felt like everything was locked into a linear timeline. I was only able to manipulate loops and effects. I only had so much stuff I could do. I mean, I still had a lot of control, but with the modular, I can go from like 0 BPM to like audio rate modulation, like in a matter of 1 second.
And that melts faces.
And that can melt faces, and like to be able to have that much expressive control at your fingertips and be able to really kind of read into an audience, So I occasionally will look up and just kind of see, just kind of as I'm doing things to see if I'm getting. Because you're basically having a conversation with people there, So I try to do a little bit of that. I try to get a little bit of feedback and see what's happening in the room and just adjust things as I'm going along. And if things are, maybe if I need to pick it up a little bit, I just drive things up and create a little more activity, and then so it's a little bit of play on a little. It's a balance of all these little different things, I think. At least it is for me.
Yeah. I just settled into this idea that we didn't even need to have you there for the performance anymore. We could just send the patch on tour.
Well,
but now hearing this, I'm like, well, no, this is great. This is why we need you there.
Well, but it's interesting. Yeah, but it's like, well, I mean, if I had the choice, that never gets to happen for me, though.
Right, right.
What the artist wants never is ever whatever. I get there and that I never get what I ever want. I always have to show up and be, no, Rich, we want you right here, front and center. We want to see everything. Oh, we don't care about you. We just want to look at your case. So
I was talking
back
about
a few feet.
I was talking about sending like your sculpture on tour.
Oh, the sculpture.
Yeah, I was talking about that, but it seems like no, wait, we really do need you here, even though you think you're in your box and no one can watch you. You're actually saying you walk around the room, you scope it out, you get strategies going for the evening. Do you do this, Bana?
Walk around the room before I play?
Yeah.
Not as much as I would like to. I mean, I think it also depends. It depends on the setting. It depends on how much time you have to set up. It depends. There's so many external factors that play into that. But it is something that I would like to do more.
Have you ever just increased the tempo of something just because you felt like the room needed it?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, definitely. Or I'll definitely kind of maybe extend sections or shorten sections if I feel that they're not resonating in a space the way that they did in the studio. Because sometimes things sound amazing on a smaller system, and then also like the volume difference. Practicing in a studio and then going to a venue, and then things kind of resonate very differently. So
absolutely.
I will kind of extend or shorten sections depending on how it feels. Even though I'm not looking at the audience, I can kind of feel it, I guess.
You can tell. You can get an energy out of it. Did that happen last night at all during your performance?
Yes.
Really?
Yes, there were some sections that I shortened because they just didn't sound good to me compared to what they sounded like on headphones or through smaller studio monitors. It did not come across at all what I had in mind. So I just kind of like, okay, I'm gonna go here now because it's not working.
Yeah. Mo, you had a big hiccup last night because power cycled and you lost a bunch of settings right before your set started. This is kind of what I'm talking about with the whole danger element. Bana's saying she shortened these sections because it wasn't sounding good. What did you do? How did you deal with it?
I mean, I didn't expect it, to be honest.
Well, you never.
I looked at the table before it got carried out to the stage, and everything was fine. And then it went out there, and you did your introduction, and the lights went dim, and I walked out, and I sat down, and everything was booting up. I was like, oh, okay, I got to start over right now. So it's like, I have a series of quantizers that I got to program each individual scale to like get going. So I started doing that, but there was like this uncomfortable silence for a little bit too long. So I was like, okay, we're just gonna use my left hand to try to make some sounds to just get this going while my right hand sets everything else up. So it took me like a good, 10 minutes, which felt like an hour to get
it. Wasn't that long. I would say it's more in the range of like the first 4 or 5. Yeah, it probably did feel a lot longer for you than it actually was for us. But
so
it
was definitely a rough start. But then once I got everything set up in another groove, then it just
and it started
there it goes. And
you didn't let it stop you, in other words.
No, I mean you can't choke. You got to keep going.
You got to keep going.
You got to keep going.
I got a funny story that my wife told Mo last night. That's kind of a similar situation. So I played at Red Rocks last year with Soundtribe, Sector 9, STS9. Those guys, it was sold out. I think it was like 9,000 or 10,000 people there. And they had me open up for them. And I was playing a modular set, and I was playing In the Round, which is basically this it's in front of house, kind of in the middle of the crowd. You're kind of like looking up at like thousands of people. And this place is a beautiful, gorgeous venue. So I'll give you one bit of advice. Don't have your kids dancing behind you while you're performing. During my performance, my daughter comes up as I'm playing. She's like, "Daddy, can I turn the knob?" So she comes up and she steps on my power cable and shuts all the power off on myself. And I'm standing there in front of like 9,000 people, and just like that uncomfortable silence of like 9 to 10 seconds where I was like, oh fuck. And there's all these people staring at you, and it's like out of all the shows and places for something like that to happen, and it was being recorded and streamed live. Live Nation was recording everything. All my friends were watching this on TV, watching my daughter, and they all saw the moment where I looked at my daughter and I'm like going, like she just did the best thing ever. She's like, "Daddy, did I help you?" You helped me out, babe. You really, you did great, right? And then I pulled my power cable back in, and I had to like figure out, because I was using a lot of digital modules, I had to reset up everything and scramble while it's just quiet. And everyone's like kind of talking, trying to figure out what's going on, and eventually after 5 minutes, I get things going again and start playing. But you run into so just if you play your performance, just keep your kids off site. Keep your power cables gapped just super tight in your case.
It's funny though, like how in when laptop performances were more relevant and everybody was doing it. Everybody was like, "Oh yeah, playing with computers sucks because if they crash on stage, then like you're screwed." And it's like, they would always like, "I'm play only with the hardware, or only with vinyl, or to avoid this thing." And it's like really in this kind of format that anything can go wrong.
Right.
You got more
hardware set, laptop, turntable, needles can bump around and scratch, whatever. Anything can go wrong.
Right.
Just got to go with it.
Yeah.
Do we have time for one more question, or no? No more questions. Sorry. Folks, thank you so much for sitting through. And if you haven't already done it, I urge you to hang on to your programs where the names of these artists are inside of it. I'm sure you've already heard a lot of their music, but just in case you haven't, I would urge you to go check out some of their music when you get home from the event. Thanks.